One thing you should learn right away is the word deportation is a word that existed before 1996. Today we call it removal, but it's a misnomer as well because it's really covering many different forms of ordering someone out of the country. This is a picture of our Safe Passage team. I just told you we're here, we're ready, excited. Look at us all bundled up in freezing weather at 8 in the morning. This is a picture the Daily News took. Yes, we do bring children to the court with us when they're day off school, and it's our court docket day. We're dedicated volunteers. But in that picture, you see law students, you see volunteer interpreters, you see staff, and we are there at the docket every day of every month, and our next docket is Friday, August 15th. Claire Thomas coordinates the staffing of the docket, so even if you haven't volunteered with us before, we usually can use additional lawyers to supervise law students or to do interviews themselves at our docket. All right, 3 kinds of removal. My favorite, because it's the most evil in the world, and yes, I'm being political again, expedited removal. I know there are countries in Europe that are even harsher, and one could say Australia's worse because they interdict the boats at sea and put you onto an island prison. I think we will do that too, and in fact, we have done it in the past. Guantanamo today, to many of you, is an island prison for enemy combatants, but some of you remember the Haitian situation of the early 1990s know that we actually used Guantanamo as a detention space for people we had screened in as potential refugees but who were HIV positive. If you've never read Storming the Court, it's a book written by one of my colleagues here. It's a story of Harold Coe, who's a professor at Yale Law School, and his students trying to sue on behalf of those Haitians. The story has a happy ending, saying that all their clients were ultimately allowed in the United States and secured refugee status. It actually has a horrible ending, so it's a false ending in the book, because the Supreme Court in that case ruled that it doesn't violate the International Convention on the Protection of Refugees to interdict boats at seas and to do a cursory interview of people on those boats and to push them back if a government official doesn't believe they have a claim. To me, if you have a protection in the law but it's an illusion because the process negates the protection, I don't know, I just can't even imagine being on a crowded boat, being taken onto a military vessel like a Coast Guard ship and supposed to talk to an officer in uniform and tell them that's true, or even if there's a really well-trained asylum officer there partnering in that context on that military ship. I just can't believe that's the best way to do refugee assessment, but that happens. Our children are not being interdicted at sea. The kids that we're seeing, the unaccompanied migrants, they're being stopped at the border. But Congress in 1996, it wasn't enough to stop the boats. We had to stop the people on the airplanes. We had to stop the people in the cars, and we had to stop the people at the ports of entry. And so in 1996, Congress created this statute, expedited removal. It's found in Section 235, subsection B of the INA. And it gives the authority, I'm going to speak in vernacular here, it gives the authority of a Border Patrol inspector to interview someone or someone greeting you at an international flight to interview you. And if when they ask you why you're coming, they believe you are giving a false answer, misrepresenting your answer, or they find you lack documents because they've stopped you and you have no documents to give you admission to the United States, they may summarily order you removed and deported, excluded from the United States. It's a 5-year ban on reentry to the United States. It is the same as if you went before a judge. Now, the only thing that that officer needs in addition to his own signature is the signature of his supervisor. So his supervisor must sign off. So you get 2 signatures of Customs and Border Protection officers, and with all due respect to them, they're not lawyers, they're not judges, they are inspectors. Those 2 people, if they find you have made a misrepresentation or fraud or you're lacking documents, they can order you expeditedly removed. For that reason, that tremendous power, Congress did at least put in one exception, and they really had to because of our signing on the Refugee Convention, and it said if the individual articulates a credible fear of harm, persecution, or torture, then the officer has to, at least under the regulations, theoretically detain the individual until they can have a credible fear interview, which is conducted by trained asylum officers. And they're not supposed to summarily order you expeditedly removed. So There's anecdotal evidence put together. Really, it tried to be scientific, but they couldn't do a random sample, and they couldn't do their sample unobserved by a commission on religious freedom, which found that there was really a concern about how expedited removal was being operated. And I didn't put the numbers in here, but today more people are ordered deported through expedited removal and stipulated orders of removal and reinstatement orders of prior orders of removal than through the court in these categories 2 and 3. But why are you spending all this time on this, Benson? Children are not subject to expedited removal. Well, thank God they aren't. I'm very appreciative of the administration in 1997. There's a memorandum that said children should not be subjected to expedited removal. And of course, one can think of all the reasons why, compassion and care for the child. But really the reason is due process of law. How can you possibly conduct an interview about committing a misrepresentation or fraud with a child who has a tourist visa because the child has no capacity to commit misrepresentation or fraud? And also, you're conducting an interview of a child who's unrepresented because you don't have a right to representation at the border. So the memorandum is right. What's happening in Congress today is really, it could be an instruction to the Customs and Border Patrol, use expedited removal against children. And that's just wrong. It's wrong. Our country has very strong laws and very robust laws to remove people, but it shouldn't be used against children, particularly those under the age of 16. But I would say, under our law, children are children until 21. However, we do have an agreement with Mexico and Canada that they will accept repatriation of unaccompanied minors. And so one of my former volunteers who has just finished an LLM at Fordham, she's sitting for the bar today. Prayers and best wishes to her for the bar exam. She's an admitted attorney in Mexico, and she is going to join the immigration ministry in Mexico. She contacted the Mexican Senate, and their data, to the degree that it's accurate, is 72,000 children pushed back in the last 5 years to Mexico, the median age 11. Why would so many children be coming across our border who are unaccompanied from Mexico? I think we all know that part of it is the disruption in the Mexican civil life, the dangerousness. Sometimes it's poverty. It's also to try to find relatives. Many of the children are trying to find relatives that are living in the United States.